Is there any way you can put the laptop up a bit higher? Is there some books you can sit it on, or a box?
It's my iPad, so I am putting some books.
Oh, okay.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Just don't plan to look at the iPad. Plan to obviously just look eye level with whatever's something in front of you. Yeah, actually, you might need to put it higher if you can.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Okay, good. Now the main thing is it's rushed, and it lacks a sense of who you're speaking to.
Okay.
So it lacks a sense of just intention or emotional connection, right? Because it's obviously pretty serious in terms. We've had discussions on it before. He is in this sense of disgrace, right? So there has to be. You have to have that sense in the first part of the sonnet. Right, you have to build that so that when the shift comes in at the end, on this happily I think on thee, and that's a crucial turning point. So you've got to set something up in the beginning to be able to have that shift at the end.
Okay.
And one of the main things is just take more time with it.
Right.
And on the very first line, the word end is tripping you up.
Okay.
It's just fortune in men's eyes. You're saying fortune and men's eyes, just fortune and men's eyes. Just kind of throw it away a little bit more. It's just the ends becoming.
Okay.
And you just, think of what they are, right? So when in disgrace with fortune, you got to have an idea of what fortune is. And men's eyes, right? Not only are you in disgrace with what your future holds, what your fortune holds, but you're also in disgrace with public opinion. The general consensus is that we don't respect you. And then it's in that state you're beweeping, right? So there has to be this sense of you weeping the fact that you're in this outcast position.
Right.
Just try it again.
Okay. And go slow. Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate.
All right, just hold it there. Let's do that one again. So even from the very beginning, the word disgrace. Right? So when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, so you're saying when that happens, what do you do? Okay, when I'm in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I sit all alone and beweep my outcast state. Right, that's what you do. And then the trouble, death, heaven, that's like a thing that you're adding on just to give it more of a description of what you do. Right? So I all alone, use the alone, beweep my outcast state.
Okay.
And trouble, deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Just use those words, right? Curse is a word that you can use, the curse my fate. Just try that quatrain again, that opening quatrain.
Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate.
All right, better. Let's figure out some places to breathe. So after bootless cries, you're going to need a breath. So that you can then say, and look upon myself. And that's where you can, where we've discussed a little bit of dramatic suspension. So it's also the sense of trying to find the words to describe just how shitty you feel.
Right.
Right? So and trouble deaf heaven, and deaf, heaven's deaf. Remember that, because at the end, here you're troubling deaf heaven with bootless cries. Bootless meaning they're unheard because heaven is deaf.
Right.
But what do we do at the very end of the sonnet?
We were singing hymns at Heaven's Gate.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's, yeah, you can use that. So much better. Just try again, go again from the beginning, but use that disgrace. It's a disgraceful word.
Right.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state.
Okay.
All right. Try again.
Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi.
Okay.
Maybe I could watch a bit.
No problem.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate.
Okay, much better. Just want to
Okay.
try it once more though with these breaths. So I want you to take
Suspension. Okay.
Yeah. So I want you to take a breath after disgrace. When in disgrace, breath. With fortune and men's eyes, breath. I all alone beweep my outcast state. You could take a breath after alone, right? Because you gotta remember that the breath is what allows you to express the intention. Robert's always described them as like almost life jackets in an ocean of water, or buoys, right? You're swimming in this. He's described it as you're swimming in this ocean of words, and your breaths are the things that keep you afloat as you're making your way through it. So the more breaths, the better, in a sense. So let's just try it. So breath after disgrace, and just slow it down. There's some parts there where it really begins to come alive, and then it just gets rushed again.
Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate.
Much better. Keep going.
Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, happily I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Did that feel any different to the first couple of times?
Yeah.
Yeah, it came across much more clear. And so there's still a lot more space to really slow it down and use those suspensions. And then just the counterpoint.
Yeah, I didn't do I didn't think about the counterpoint. Okay.
Yep. And also think about, I mean, who are you speaking this sonnet to?
To my lover.
Okay.
Because it says, for thy sweet love remembered. Or, happily I think on thee. Or, yeah, could be a friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's whoever there's thee, right? There's thee and thy is. So there is an actual intended audience of this specific individual. So you need to have that sense that you're actually speaking to a person.
Right.
And also that's where that shift comes in, right? It gets this very, very low point, yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, happily I think on thee. And the thee that's the turning point. Because that's the thing that reminds you, it's you that reminds me what the things are that I enjoy the most. Right? Because remember that we discussed this previously on this question of, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Right? So those things that he most enjoys are those things that have gotten him into this position of disgrace.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like you get into this point where, okay, I'm despising myself. I'm going to give up those things that I enjoy the most because they're just bringing me nothing but, disgrace.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in that moment that this other individual, he thinks on, I think on thee, and then everything changes.
Right.
And that, everything changes to the point that I say, I don't give a shit about the court. Right? Who cares? Then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Right.
Right. So it's this complete 180 that happens.
Right.
So let's go again from the beginning, and then maybe we'll look a little bit more on those other couple of quatrains.
Okay.
And put your pencil down. I can see you. Pick a spot on the wall, and think of it as though it's another person that you're actually speaking to.
Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state.
All right, start again. Breathe. Take actual breaths after, right? Fortune in men's eyes. You can't keep going into you have nothing for alone and beweep if you don't take a breath there.
Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me, like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Wow, that was completely different.
Okay.
That was so much more powerful.
Good.
So much more moving.
Yep.
And it's just because you took the time to breathe.
Yep.
And the other thing is that when you take the time to breathe, the breath also provides oxygen for the brain, and it allows you to think.
Yep.
Right? Because it's those moments of breath that new thoughts are generated,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what allows you to continue, a process
Right.
as you figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it felt completely different.
It did. No, it did. I'm gonna have to watch that again. Last time.
The one part that's still tough, and I know that it's just tough with this sonnet in general, is that switch, because there's particularly this line, and then my state, like the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. It's kind of a long, difficult passage to get through. So we need to figure out how to navigate that. And I think maybe there it just requires a different energy, almost like a faster, like a shift in speed. Not that you'll then just kind of rattle it off, right? And then my state but there's a joy that comes in, and an excitement. So it switches out of this kind of slower, like, self-reflective mode into this kind of sense of excitement.
I've been trying to do that, like not breaking that line, just, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate.
Well, you're still going to need breaths.
Right.
But you're going to need to, it's just a question of probably shorter, quick breaths.
Right.
But if you think of it, and then my state, because he's still trying to figure out how to explain it. Right, so in my state, and it's like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth. Like that's the metaphor he's using.
Right.
And I know in my version it's got parentheses around that part.
Mine too.
Yeah,
I don't know
because
what that exactly means in terms of pronunciation.
What do you mean in terms of having the parentheses there?
Like, yeah, does he want us to, like, what's the purpose of having it there? Why a parenthesis?
Well, Shakespeare probably didn't put them there.
I didn't know that.
I would say that he probably didn't. He doesn't use parentheticals in any of his plays for his characters in terms of, okay, now I want you to do a parenthetical.
Right.
So I think it's more something that the editors have put in.
Mm-hmm.
But it is this sense of it's almost the sense that it's not even necessary to say those words. Right? You could get away with this line saying, happily I think on thee, and then my state sings hymns at heaven's gate.
Mm-hmm.
Right, whereas my state previously was troubling deaf heaven with bootless cries, now my state sings hymns at heaven's gate. Right, so the parenthetical is just adding and making something much more specific, much more descriptive.
Right. Okay.
Instead of this idea of we're just going to keep it simple, stupid, and give you the, just the raw data. It's like developing the idea and giving you a much greater image of what my emotion is. And so I think you can use it there where you're trying to find those words. How can I tell you the way my memory, the reminder of you, just thinking of your name, just thinking of you, trying to describe to you the effect that has on me. And the effect is that I become like the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth. Anyway, so let's just play with that part and see. It's going to be a tough part to start from. I guess just start from that quatrain, yet in these thoughts.
Okay. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark, at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate.
All right, that's tough.
Yeah.
So save the. Let's go from the. We'll go from the desiring this man's art and that man's scope.
Okay.
And then and then come into that. So on that first line, yet in these thoughts, just remember you've got monosyllabic words there, right? So you could use them. Yet in these thoughts, probably these thoughts saying, you know, these thoughts of disgrace and despair. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, happily I think on thee. And you need to use the thee. So happily, which is the inversion, happily I think on thee.
Right.
And you let that sit for a little bit. Take a breath, and then describe. So just go from desiring this man's art.
Desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contended least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
So you're using the like, and then you're finding the words after that, right? That's the sense I have at the moment.
Yeah.
Try it if you get to, try it after state, and then my state, and that's where you're figuring it out, and then you find the words and you just kind of go for it.
Okay.
Right? So it's, and then my state, and you almost have the whole idea immediately at that point. So you don't need to say, okay, I'm like the lark at break of day, but what am I doing at break of day? Oh yeah, I'm arising from sullen earth. It's just, you've already, you get that whole idea.
Okay.
And then my state, like the lark at breaking day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven. So just find it as a whole, the metaphor as a whole when you finally discover it. So you then give it as a whole, if that makes sense.
Okay. Where do you want me to begin?
Same place, desiring this man's art.
Desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contended least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate.
Is that a mouthful?
How did that? No.
You didn't look too excited about that one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
What are you thinking?
Nothing specific. Just...
All right, just try it again. It was better.
Desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate.
Oh, I know what's happening. The excitement is just decrescendoing.
What does that mean?
You're losing that sense of excitement that comes in on thee. It's there to begin with, like it's there from the like to the lark at break of day, but then by the time you get to arising at sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. It's like petering out. So it's just a question of driving all the way through, keeping the tension, the intensity, all the way through to heaven's gate. You don't let the excitement drop, because you're out of this state of depression, right? You're like, okay, I remembered you, I remembered your love, I remembered these great ideas that make me the most contented.
Right.
So you drive that through. Just try it once more, and then we'll go back from the top.
Right.
And go all the way through to the through that last couplet too. Yeah.
Okay. Desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet, in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Okay, it's getting there. Let's put it together with the whole sonnet, because then I think that will help influence that shift.
Okay. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet, in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
All right. There's some really, that second quatrain in particular really just came to life.
Good.
That run through. There's just some, there were some really beautiful points there where you could tell that where it was just really alive.
Okay.
It was very, very good. But I think you can still, you need more of it, and you'll see it when you go back and listen to it, is that there can just be a bigger contrast when the shift comes in. And this happily I think on thee. There can be just, there's room for more excitement and joy. And there's certain words, and you'll be able to, that can help you. In particular, like this last couplet there, and you have it on the sweet love. That really stands out, right? Mm-hmm. For thy sweet love remembered is crucial. Such wealth brings. So you can use wealth and brings, again, monosyllabic series there.
Yeah, the whole second line, 2 lines are monosyllabic.
Oh yeah, except for the word remembered. Yep.
Yes, except for that.
So yeah, there's lots you can do there, right? Such wealth brings, but then I scorn to change my state with kings. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay.
All right. Very good.
Thank you. Do you want to work with Hassan on the chorus?
Sure. Let me just quickly find my copy of it. Hold on 1 second.
Would it make a big difference if you guys change room?
We have to stand, and the room's not that big, and Joanne has to see us too.
It's not too big a
We
deal.
tried in there. We started in there. He prefers we stand, so we have to move out.
But he's Shakespeare. It's going to inspire you.
I know, but he has
hard
to
to
work.
multitask.
I know.
That's okay though.
We've never done this before, so next time we'll plan it.
It's the first time I decided Shakespeare.
Good.
Except
Keep it
one
up.
time, I decided that sonnet
Mm-hmm.
to Matthew in the metro, but everybody was like, "You were here."
Maybe.
You couldn't imagine.
I think so. I remember vaguely. I don't remember.
But it was very, very bad. It was just decided.
Well, keep this up and we'll get better.
All right. I couldn't find my copy. Let me just pull it up here. So this is just the prologue?
Yes, it's the first prologue where he talks to the audience
Mm-hmm.
and tell them to imagine what's going to happen instead of just looking at the scene.
Yep.
Also keep in mind he's intimidated by you.
No, I'm not.
You'll be fine. How long have you been working on the speech?
Well, this speech, it's been 1 year because I had to study it for school, but I've never recited it. It was just only written and commenting and stuff.
Okay.
But I've recited it to myself, not to anybody else.
Okay, great.
Okay, so
All right. Just go for it.
So I'm going to do everything. I think it's going to be a little fast because I don't know how to control, but I'll do it anyway.
All right.
Okay. Sorry, I was reading. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden ode the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt? But pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place 1,000,000, and let us, seafarers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose, within the girdle of these walls were now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high, apparelled, and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Think, piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. No, I'm lost.
That's it. No, keep going. You're right on. Into 1,000 parts. Go right from there. Piece out our imperfections.
Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts.
Into 1,000.
Into a thousand parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must their wings find them here and there, turning the accomplishments of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me chorus to this history, who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
All right. That's pretty good for the first time you've recited it.
Really? Thank you. But I still need to learn it more by heart because I get confused sometimes by the end.
Yep. One thing that I found useful in memorizing them and also checking, I mean, you have it fairly well, pretty accurate, but I also find writing the scenes out is very useful tool because it gives you, when you're writing it out, it gives you enough time to think about what's coming next because the time it takes you to write it, and it also allows you to then go back and check what you've written out against the actual text and make sure you've got it, got it all right. But generally, it's I think you have a good understanding of the speech. Have you done any work in terms of like the meter that Shakespeare is using, the iambic pentameter, things like that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The iambic pentameter.
Have you ever heard of it?
What that is?
Never heard of it? Okay.
Oh.
So Shakespeare writes all these sonnets, most of these plays in it's called verse. Verse is just, your typical word for non-prose, so it's actually written in some form of rhythmical meter.
Mm-hmm.
And the meter that Shakespeare uses is called iambic pentameter.
Okay.
And have you ever heard of that before?
No.
Okay.
Perhaps French, because I studied in French. I don't know
what the French word is. I have no clue.
Okay.
Can't help you there, sorry. English, unfortunately, is my one and only language. So an I am is the way I think the terminology goes back to the Greeks. But an I am is a description of a foot. So iambic pentameter being 5 feet per line, and each foot is made up of an I am, and an I am is a unstressed, stressed syllable.
Oh, okay.
So basically, each line has 10 syllables, right? Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene.
Okay, I understand.
Right? So it's a
Yeah.
rhythm that exists in the way that Shakespeare writes. And like we were just talking briefly there, I said to Avneet, right, there's these things called inversions, right? So he'll set up this rhythm and then he will break the rhythm deliberately. So he'll put things stressed where in the rhythm it would usually be unstressed. Right, so it begins to develop a real musicality to it.
Okay.
But maybe Avneet can show you some more of that as well. So these are the different things that help you pull apart these speeches more and more.
Okay.
So there's different things in terms of the way Shakespeare writes to explore. And then there's obviously just the different techniques in terms of acting, right?
Okay.
The question of using your breath. And the other thing Shakespeare uses a lot of is, and I mentioned it to Avneet there, monosyllabic series. Have you heard?
Yeah.
Right? So a series of 3 or more monosyllabic, single syllable words. So that very beginning there, oh, for a muse of fire, right? So it just becomes places that Shakespeare gives you more leverage to really kind of dig in deeper.
Okay.
So those are things we can discuss and kind of explore as they come up. But let's just go from the beginning again, and try and just focus your attention, right? Pick a point on the wall and imagine that's the audience. So speak, don't speak down to the computer or anything, speak out in front of you and and keep your focus, but you'll be fine.
And you want me to go until what point?
Just start again from the beginning.
Okay, until the end?
We'll see.
Okay.
I'll stop you if you need to.
Okay, I'll try to keep in mind the rhythm that you talked about.
Yeah, don't think about it too much because it'll probably trip you up. But it's more of a tool to look at. It's more of a tool of investigation to figure out what Shakespeare's putting the emphasis on and finding out what's the crucial elements. It's not so much how you would speak the actual lines. But,
okay, I understand.
So just go from the top.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment.
All right, let's stop there. So you're very high in your vocal register. Have you done any singing work?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, not with you, but...
Right, so you know the idea of your vocal registers, your first, second, third register?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're probably speaking when you start, you're already speaking in the top of your second register. And it makes it very difficult for you to take that anywhere. So what you need to think about is starting much, much lower so that then you have the entire range of your voice at your disposal, right?
Okay.
So because you want to be able to inflect certain things, right? That would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. Right, but if you're already speaking up really high, that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, right? There's nowhere to go, and the audience won't recognize the differentiation in the voice.
Okay.
Because that, you got to remember, that's what the mind is responding to. The mind's not responding just simply to the words that it's hearing. It's
But to the
responding to
sounds.
the musicality,
Okay.
right? To the interval changes. So let's just try that again from the very beginning, and just think of trying to start
Lower.
lower in your register.
Okay.
So, oh, for a muse of fire. And just use that oh. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
All right, still very high. Can you go, oh, for a muse of fire?
Oh. Okay.
Oh.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
All right, see, the next challenge is after getting the low note on the O, you got to keep the rest of every other. Your tendency is to just jump straight back up.
Okay.
That low note was so much better. Yay!
Who's that?
There's Shannon. So just think of that low note and just say that whole first line as low as you can in your vocal register. Don't worry about giving it expression at this point. I just want to see if you can just stay in that low register.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
Okay, try once more. It was better, but again, you got out of it. So, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
Okay, because me when I do it, it's I think I want to make the audience hear it, and if it's slow, I think that they won't.
Right here. Don't say
Okay.
that
Okay.
And the other, you can't shout at an audience, and you can't, like, a high-pitched voice won't, the audience won't respond, right? And the key thing is that you've got to stay away. I mean, you're not monotone in any respect, but if you ever get stuck, if you get stuck in one register of your voice and you stay there, the audience will switch off.
Okay, I understand.
Right, because they're just hearing the same. It's like hitting the high C on the keyboard, and just hitting it over and over and over and over again. At a certain point, people are just like, "Oh, stop!" Right? So you've got to train yourself to use your whole vocal range, and the key is to always start as low as possible in your vocal range.
Okay.
So just try it. Just try that whole first line, keeping the whole thing in your first register.
Oh. That wasn't low enough.
That's fine.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
Wow. Much better.
I understand.
You feel the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after, do I keep on the same tone or do I go higher?
Well, that where you just spoke those lines, that should be where you 70% of the time.
Okay.
You're going to come in and out of that, but that you're just establishing that as like your base foundation.
Okay.
Right, and that's something you'll just have to practice. I mean, I've had to work with my first register. I mean, I used to spend 10 minutes every day reading written text and just reading the whole thing in my first register as much as possible, just as a way to train myself to use that lower part of my voice. So, let's just, with that in mind, let's just try it from the top.
Okay.
And go through the first, we'll just keep going. But keep that in mind that, and if you do get high, just come back down. Okay. Right? Because that's the other thing. Like, in monarchs, to behold the swelling scene, then should the warlike carry, right? To be able to make that contrast between the shift in the speech, you want to go from one vocal register into a different one.
Okay.
Right? Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars. And then similar thing again, right? Crouch for employment, and then the pardon. So you got to be able to shift and deliberately. You want to be in control of your voice, not your voice in control of you. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So, all right, let's go from the top.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
All right, start again. You're already out of it.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, legion like hounds, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment.
All right, much better. Now, are you reading that off the paper?
Yes.
All right, you know it off by heart. So go again from the top. I want you to focus your attention out in front of you.
Okay.
Imagine there's a room full of people, right? You're on that stage. You're setting the scene. So just...
I'm not ready yet.
Too late. All right.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should a warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment.
Okay. Much better. And you're actually starting to keep in a good vocal register. And now that you have that foundation, now we want to think about the words that you want to actually inflect, and so that the audience can hear them, right? So, oh, for a muse of fire, right? We want to use that. We want them to hear the word fire, so you want to inflect fire.
Okay.
That would ascend the brightest heaven, right? It's not just ascending heaven, but you want it to ascend from the brightest heaven, right? That would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. And then this interesting part here, right? A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Right, so then that's where you want to start using the inflection to really develop the idea further.
Okay.
Right, so let's just try that whole chunk again.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire. No, I didn't change yours.
This is where the challenge becomes inflecting a word versus just punching it.
It's because in French I'm used to keeping the same tone because it's a very, very monotonous language. So it's a bit of, but I'm trying.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment.
All right, much better.
Is the last in the at some point he makes an enumeration, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment. Do I have to inflect on the hounds or on the three words?
Did you say hounds? Is that what you asked? Well, if you look there at the leashed in like hounds, you have a monosyllabic series there. So and leash based on the iambic. So the iambic would be leashed in like hounds, should fem, and sword and fire.
Okay.
But he's inverting it. So the leashed is actually falling on a stress.
Okay.
So it'd be leashed in like hounds, should fem and sword and fire.
Okay.
But if you look at that whole opening, that line there, leashed in like hounds, it's monosyllabic, so you can use you don't have to think about that in terms of just inflecting something. You can use that whole series, so you could give them all equal emphasis, right?
Okay.
And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. Crouch is another inversion of the iambic there, that you can also use.
Okay.
But the main thing there is driving that through and finishing the thought, right? You're tending to leave that thought kind of, it's not quite clear whether it's the end of a thought or not. So you're saying, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment? It's almost like, oh, I'm not sure whether this is a question or what, right? But that's the end. It's almost like it's
It's
because
almost
the
like
next
a scene on its own.
It's almost like a what? Sorry, what did you say?
It's almost like another chorus on its own.
Yeah, there's a whole shift that's about to take place, right? That's the end of his opening, and now he's addressing the audience directly. But pardon, it's like, oh, there's people there. Okay, but pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that are dead, and the whole tone of it changes. When I worked with Robert on this, we had the sense that almost at the beginning here, it's almost like a prayer. It's like, oh shit, we're about to try and we're going to try and bring this whole story of these two kingdoms, and we're going to go from England to France and France to England. Like, this is insane. What the hell are we trying to do? God, please help us pull this off. Right? So it's almost like a little prayer that he's saying before the play begins.
Exactly.
Right? So, and then it shifts completely, right? So that's that opening from O for Muse of Fire through to Crouch for Employment.
Well,
And then
I want to ask you a question about the voice register. Me, I used to go higher from the beginning because I felt like, since it was a very powerful text, I needed to reach the audience in some way to make them feel like they're going to go on a fight or something. So and I felt like if I go lower or speak slower or in a lower tone, it wouldn't have as much power to them.
So you think that a high register is going to signify a power?
No, it's because I don't know how to give it power in a lower register.
Passion.
Yeah, exactly. To give it passion.
Yeah, but passion doesn't necessarily come from. See, passion is. In singing, we talk about being connected. You have to be connected. Antonella Benatti, who various people have worked with, it comes from the gut. It's not. You can't sing from the head. You have to sing using your entire body.
Yes.
Right, and so the power comes from your gut, in a sense. It's a support from your support of your voice.
Exactly.
Right, and using those low registers can be they can be more powerful than yelling at a person. Right, if you have a person that's actually, as a funny example, someone broke into a car outside of our house one night, and I opened up the window and called out to them, but instead of like just yelling at the top of my voice, I did like this really low register, like, what the hell, what are you doing? It scared the living daylights out of them. versus if it was like a high pitched squeal, kind of yelling at them. And I kind of shocked myself, and I also shocked my husband because he thought there was some man upstairs, like in our house, But so it's more the question of finding that vocal support and the connection in your breath that will move people.
Okay.
Right? If you're not connected to what you're saying, it won't matter what register you use. It won't affect your audience. So it's more so the question of finding the connection inside yourself, and that's where he starts this speech with that and that's kind of your opening point here, right? Oh, for a muse of fire. And that's also why he gives you these monosyllabic series that you can just kind of use each word.
Uh-huh.
But it's something for you to play around with and think about.
If I can just add one thing on that, you said you were speaking in a high pitch for power, but I think the thing that you need to emphasize first is the meaning. If the tools Joanne is giving you are to help the audience hear what the meaning of the phrase is, because otherwise they're only going to hear your tone. So they might get whoa as the tone or something, maybe if you go up high, but they'll have no idea what you mean. They might just know, hey, I'm supposed to feel excited, because all you give them is a feeling or an emotion with just one tone. And Shakespeare has so much meaning that these nuances of using your registers are going to help communicate that meaning to the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because you want to engage their minds, not just their emotions.
Okay. Okay, so I'll work on
So what
that.
do you want to do? Do you want to try it again? How long do you guys have, Evnid, or what's your...
We can go for another half an hour or even more, a little more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how are you going, Shannon? Did you want to try your sonnet or anything, or are you just happy to watch, or...
Yeah, you can hear how I'm doing. Go ahead, tell him.
Okay. Hi, Elijah.
Yeah, you can say hi real quick, Elijah. Tell her what you think.
Oh no.
Oh my.
Oh no. All right. All right. So let's keep going for a little bit more here, Hassan, and you can go further into the speech. So we'll go through that shift.
Okay. So, okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
All right, let's just try that. Use that O. Your opening is just that little bit. It gets more powerful once you get through that would ascend the brightest heaven. We just need it right from the get-go, right from the very beginning, right? And just use they're monosyllabic words. So, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, right? These are the things you're pleading for. So think about it. You've walked, Chorus has walked out on stage. He's pissing his pants, so to speak, because he's not sure how they're going to pull this stuff off, right? So this is his plea, right? Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. And then what's he asking for, right? He's saying we need a kingdom for a stage. We need princes to act. And then we need monarchs to behold the swelling scene.
Okay.
And then once we have that, then should the warlike Harry, right? Once we have that, then we'll actually have enough to allow Harry to come on stage, right? Only then will it be good enough to even introduce this great King Harry to the audience, right? So just you got to jump in right from the first. Actually, before you speak the first line. Right, you gotta take a moment, prepare yourself, but it's gotta be powerful right from the very first word.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should a warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. Crouch for employment.
All right, go do that again. Right from. Make sure you take a breath after hounds, right, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. So just go from and at his heels, and then keep going.
And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment.
Oh, I know. I see what it is. You need to take a breath after fire. so that you have the breath to do something with crouch for employment. You're just kind of running out of energy there.
Okay. Okay.
And stay in your lower registers.
Okay. So, at his heels, and at his heels.
Yep.
And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment.
Employment. Just end that thought. Downward inflect that word.
Can you say the leashed in like hounds part, the last phrase?
Yeah. Well, don't try and copy me, but you just want to leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment.
Okay.
You just need a tone of the end. It's the conclusion. You're ending that thought altogether.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do the phrase because since it's half of a phrase, I don't know how to.
Okay. Yeah, go from then. You want to do it from there? Then should the warlike Harry?
Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment.
Okay, better. Keep going. Keep going.
But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt?
All right, so this is where I want you, with each of those new questions, you got to drop back down, right, into your lower register, because a question generally ends on a higher note, right? Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France?
Okay.
But if I started from out there, France, or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air of Agincourt? Like, you got nowhere to go but up.
Okay.
And you run out of space, right? So you want to drop. So can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Right, so just always think of coming back down to that first register.
Okay. So I start at can, at the question.
Go from but pardon.
Okay.
And this is much more casual, right? Like it's a completely different tone. But pardon and gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great, we use that word great, so great an object.
Okay.
And then he goes into these questions.
But pardon, gentles all. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt? But pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us see first to this great account on your imaginary forces work.
All right, let's go back. That was much better.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily because you stayed in a lower vocal register.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, what is the wooden O?
The wooden O is the globe.
Okay. All right.
I think it's the theater.
Yep. Yeah. It was a globe theater, and then it also had like metal bands that held the whole thing together, like so
Yes.
they were literally O's
Yeah.
around the building. All right. So just go from that but pardon.
Okay.
And then just keep the sense of what you're saying, right? So, but pardon and gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this being the stage, right? On this unworthy scaffold. right? We need to hear that, this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. So just take your time. Don't lose the connection to what you're saying.
Okay.
Right. So just go from but pardon.
I think that what's going to happen now is that since I know the difference between the lower and the higher, when I'm going to recite it to myself, I'm going to choose which word I want to emphasize, and it's going to be much easier to speak to the audience after. Okay. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth. Sorry?
Good, you got it. I was just going to say, use the word dared as well, right? It's important. Yeah, so the flat, unraised spirits, pardon us people, us actors, pardon Shakespeare and our producer, and, we're these flat, unraised spirits, but we're that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object.
Yeah. So actually, he's bringing all the theater down because the situation is better than the. Okay, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt? But pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little.
All right. So there's another big shift that happens there. Right. So you have to leave that did affright the air at Agincourt.
Okay.
And then you're saying, oh, pardon. It's just it's another big shift. Right. So it's a whole new part of this speech. Oh, pardon. Oh, pardon. Like you've already said, but pardon. This next one's oh, pardon.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, but pardon and gentles all, and then it's like, oh yeah, you better pardon us, because a crooked figure may attest in little place a million. So yeah, you need to pardon us, right? So the first pardon might have just been like, oh, but pardon and gentles all, but now it's like, oh, please pardon us, right? So it's different to the first pardon.
Okay.
It's got to have a new sense. But that in general was much better. In that last question, again, you have the word cram, right? Or may we cram? What is cram? You don't know what it means?
I thought you meant.
Have you ever opened a can of sardines?
Yeah.
They're crammed in there, right? It's just packed, jammed, packed.
Okay.
So it's the idea of cramming, right? We're cramming. We're gonna. Well, for example, right? He's saying we're cramming within this wooden O. So within this theater, or within just the stage of this theater, the very casks. Now the casks are the battle helmets, I believe, right, of the armies that fought. And there was, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but there was like tens of thousands of people that fought in this Battle of Agincourt.
Yes.
Right, so we're going to bring the Battle of Agincourt to this stage, right? So we're going to cram this massive battle, which was in this huge pot, we're going to put it on this little tiny stage. So we're going to cram it, or may we cram? And he's asking, can we really do this? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cast that did affright the air at Agincourt?
Yes.
Oh, pardon. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million. And now it kind of gets more into it has a bit of a different rhythm, a faster rhythm in this next part. But all right, once more from but pardon.
Okay. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million. It's not.
It's tough.
It's because I was out of breath.
Yes, you have to make decisions on where you're going to breathe,
Exactly.
and make, it's an intellectual decision. You actually sit down and you mark out, okay, I'm going to breathe here, I'm going to breathe here, and then you test it. So, oh no, it didn't quite work, I'm going to have to change it. But you want to make decisions. All right, let's just go from the top back to that far.
Agincourt. Okay. Oh no, sorry, I have to breathe.
Yeah, take the second to prepare yourself.
Oh, for a muse, a fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cask that did affright the air at Agincourt?
All right, much
I
better.
think I still need to focus on lowering because sometimes I forget. I get lost in the meaning, and I forget to focus on the rest.
Yep. But if you begin to hear it, like if you can recognize when you're in a high register, that's already a very good place to be.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things to do when you practice it is record yourself. Right.
Okay.
Most phones now have recording devices, so just record yourself and listen to it, and you can say, oh, well, I got really high in my register there, and that doesn't make sense. So, and then you go back and you do it again, and then you listen to it again. Oh, okay, that worked. Oh no, I missed that. That didn't work. So, because you wanna train your ear to be able to hear what you're doing.
Okay.
So,
but I think sorry.
No, go.
I think that now I have the principle. I can just whenever I recite it myself, focus on everything and
Can work on it.
Yeah.
Yep. And Evnie can work with you on some of that iambic.
Yeah, I can show it. This is a good place to end for today.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was very nice.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thank you a lot.
No problem. It was a lot of fun. Oh, I was going to show you guys one thing. You know what this is?
It's a cork?
It's a cork. You know what you do with it?
I remember you telling me what you did with it.
You stick it in your mouth. So a good vocal exercise, and this is for developing your support and your lung capacity. So you stick it between your teeth. And just recite. So you want to take a deep breath. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. And you'll feel it. It makes you work. It makes your lung capacity, your apparatus work twice as hard. And then when you take it out of your mouth and speak without it, it's like you have all this freedom.
Okay.
But it's a useful just breathing exercise that will help build up your lung capacity and your support, and yeah, very useful.
Okay, good.
So,
I want to try that.
Stick a cork in it.
Good.
All right, have fun.
Yeah, see
When
you
do we get to hear you do one?
See you Sunday.
Sorry.
No.
I need to do some work on one.
Yeah.
And then we need to get Robert on for some of these sessions.
Yeah, I'm ready to hear you.
I've done works on some different. Yeah. I'll bring one next week. a little bit hard to
Okay,
work
good.
on it. I'll, all right.
Okay, bye guys.
Thanks a lot, huh?
Have fun.
All right, next week.
Thanks, Shannon.